He's Peter King from Sports Illustrated. Check out the mmqb.com. Comes out every Monday morning. It is must read for the NFL fan. Pete joins us now. Pete, if I gave you a mulligan after what you saw last night, would you change your NFC team in the Super Bowl?
What a good question. And when you wake up on a Friday in Seattle after watching that performance, you'd be a fool to say you wouldn't want a mulligan. But I'm going to stick with Green Bay. And I'll stick with Green Bay because it's a long year. And just because, I think 17 Super Bowl winning teams, I forget the number, but I think that's it, have lost their first game of the year. Now, Green Bay was really exposed last night. But who really does play that well in Seattle, when you think about it? And you saw some things that alarmed you. But the one thing last night I think that's a takeaway from that game is that Seattle right now just doesn't have any weaknesses. And, again, it's a long year, but, boy, they look fantastic last night.
If you and I don't know if you can say Seattle's better than last year, but – they played extremely well, and I think people are probably going to say, well, are they a better team? I don't know if they added enough that makes them different this year to make them better. Can you make that argument?
I think you can make the argument because last year Percy Harvin played for 10 minutes, and this year he could play 17, 18, 19 games. And that in and of itself makes the offense significantly better. A guy who barely played last night, Paul Richardson, the second-round pick, has had a really, really good training camp. They have such a deep crew of receivers. They don't have famous receivers, but they have a deep crew of receivers. Last night, Russell Wilson threw to 8 of them. And I think, the people who watched the game last night saw that you see what Percy Harvin adds to a team. You have to watch that fly sweep. It's going to be one of the great, most fun plays in football this year. 4 of them last night for 41 yards for Harvin. And I also think and I said this last night, we terminally underrate Marshawn Lynch.
No.
He was the biggest offensive factor in the game last night, and it was a couple of months ago where the Seahawks are saying, well, we're bringing in these other guys, Turbin and Michael, to be 1A and 1B with them. So, they right now, I think, when you look at them, and again, they don't have all the famous guys necessarily, but they've got a bunch of pretty good guys.
What did you think of Tony Dungy in the pregame saying that Russell Wilson reminds him of Joe Montana?
It's a fantastic comparison for this point of his career. He's a distributor. He is an underrated deep ball thrower, and I think his leadership is vastly important to this team. He's Pete Carroll on the field, just the way Joe Montana was Bill Walsh on the field. Now, everybody laughs at that because they say that it's not, it's too early, and of course it's too early. But if you make the statement that it reminds him of Joe Montana early in his career, that's not making the statement that he's going to be as good as Joe Montana or anything like that. It's just making the statement that he does a lot of things that are mindful of Montana.
He's Peter King. You can go to his website, themmqb.com. It comes out every Monday morning. Mike Florio touched on this last night, and I flew back with Mike on the red eye, and we were talking about Wes Welker's situation and also Josh Gordon. It seems to be pretty fluid here that maybe there's a decision or a reversal here. What is the time frame here that you've been told on if Welker could be cleared to play Sunday night against the Colts and Josh Gordon's future with the Browns?
I don't think Welker could be cleared Sunday night against the Colts. I don't think that. I think he could get cleared, for week 2, if there's an agreement. But again, this is such a fluid situation, and the two sides have been very close very many times, and it just never gets done. It reminds me of the NFL in Los Angeles. We talk about it ad nauseum, and it never happens. And I'm not saying this won't happen. I think it probably is likely that it will happen, but I also think that there's so many moving parts left to it. But there's no question that if they do reach an agreement sometime next week, I was told yesterday what Mike was told yesterday, that there's a very good chance if that happens that at least the Wes Welker suspension will be eliminated. And I can't say the same thing because that's Mike's reporting on Josh Gordon. But I do know that the Welker part of it is true.
Anything else front burner that you found out going into this weekend?
Dan, it interested me last night. I don't know what you saw, but we spent the entire month of August every day, talking about officiating. I mean, forests were felled with filling newsprint and people on the internet just forever talking about it. And last night it was a total non-factor. I'm going to be watching that all weekend just to see what it is. But it's like I remember going to Seahawks camp in August, and Richard Sherman said to me, he said, "Listen, you can't allow officials to dictate the way you play football, and I'm not going to allow officials to dictate that. So I think players are going to adjust and adapt. And the one other factor in this, I think the league has told the officiating crew that grabbing jerseys, that is going to be a foul anywhere. But if you don't redirect a receiver, if you touch him going downfield and don't redirect him, you can't throw a flag on that." I think that's what we saw last night. Very light contact from Richard Sherman, from Byron Maxwell. And they didn't get called. They haven't got called all preseason, and they weren't called last night.
Is it more of a PR move that the Cowboys brought in Michael Sam, or that you found out that the league was sort of nudging teams to bring in Michael Sam?
Well, I mean, Dallas is a little bit of a different story because, Jerry Jones is the kind of guy who likes that attention. And so I think he naturally would be drawn to looking at Michael Sam anyway. And they could have a gosh-awful defense at the start of the season anyway. So to bring in a guy who had a good preseason on somebody else's roster, rushing the passer, why not give it a try? But I do think that there are some people around the league, and I talked to one of them who really chafed at the league sending out a memo to some teams, basically asking them if they'd evaluated Michael Sam, what they thought of him, and obviously going out of their way to try to help Michael Sam get a job.
They do that with any other player?
I don't think so.
What do you think of that, Pete?
The league, I think, wants to make absolutely sure that Michael Sam gets his shot. They don't want him to, if he doesn't play football anymore, for it to be for any other reason than he wasn't a good enough player. And that's what they're trying to do. I think on the one hand, it's, I don't know, I wouldn't call it noble. On the one hand, it's a nice effort, but on the other hand, I think that's probably not what Michael Sam wants. I think what Michael Sam wants is to be treated equally. And I think, Dan, the one thing about all this is, and I don't think any of us can know what goes on in the hearts and minds of the people who are making these decisions. But the one thing I do know is that I think the whole distraction thing about this is just not applicable. It's a 20-minute story when Michael Sam gets to the Dallas Cowboys. Once in a while, people might bring it up over the next few weeks, but The guy's on the practice squad. It's not going to be a big story.
Thank you, Pete. Good seeing you. Get some sleep.
All the best, Dan. Thank you.
That's Peter King, mmqb.com.